I think the program is a joke. It's just a political thing. We're increasing the borrowing amount so people can cover their construction costs to build these units. Everywhere across the country, except for Toronto and Vancouver, you don't need more space on the CMHC loans. A lot of them.
Welcome to The Flow, Real Estate and Money Show, a show focused on helping Canadians understand the different elements of real estate, mortgage, and finance. The goal of our show is to provide Canadians with the tools, information, and knowledge to have more success when it comes to their investing and real estate related decisions going forward. My name is Alex McFadyen, and I'm your host. I can't wait to get you into the flow. Keaton Bessey, thank you very much for joining the show here today, my friend. I'm grateful to have you on and happy that we were connected through all the power that is social media so that you can share your thoughts and feelings and opinions and all that fun stuff around what's happening in the property management and more specifically, the rental world as it relates to real estate here in the end of 2024. And man, that has been a freaking, it's always a hot topic, let's be honest here, but there's just like a boiling point right now where just everything is going on. Got to ask you right off the bat is like, what is the one thing, if you could think of like, what is the one hottest topic right now as it relates to anything rentals in the Greater Vancouver area right now?
In my world, it would be how slow the market is. It's incredibly slow. People are still making moves to keep property they already own and try to move people into it. We have a lot of potential client outreach from landlords trying to have us help them rent out their property. A lot of them have already tried and failed, so I think we can do it better. We can, but we can't change the market. So we tell them what the market is, and they freak out about that, and it's just bad timing, right? That on top of decades-long construction boom in purpose-built rentals coming in the next 12, 24 months, there's going to be a lot more options for tenants coming up, which is good news.
There is good news for tenants on the horizon. It's the first time in probably, I guess, going back 5 years that I can remember anyone really saying good news for tenants.
It's just COVID. It was just COVID. And then before that, I think it's been well over 10 years where our vacancy rate's been less than 1.5%.
Right. Well, and specifically, looking back from, as you mentioned, 2020, using the C word there up until today, it's been basically insane month over month increases on rent. And obviously that's had a big impact on everything from mortgage qualifications to people's ability to qualify and increase house prices, keep their existing properties. And well, we've obviously seen the quote unquote drop when it relates or crash or whatever you want to call it from the increase in mortgage rates. And now we're starting to see things go backwards. So it's really interesting to note that now, as we see rates coming down from the BOC, now today when we're talking, it's a 1.25% decrease from the top, that at the same time, we've seen rental rates continue to come down, which is almost like an odd correlation at this point right now. When you think about I know there's a lot of factors here. You mentioned the influx of apartment buildings. You mentioned obviously a lot of people trying to keep their homes. Like, if you were to look at what is like the one theme, like in your mind, what is the one thing that's dropping rental rates more than anything else right now?
The main thing that comes to mind is it just like transaction volumes are down. So when you have a vacancy rate of 1%, 1.4%, I think it was the last rate, and real estate transactions slow, then musical chairs has stopped, right? Like people just aren't moving as much. Less tenants are being asked to move out, less investment properties being purchased for people to move into. It's just slower all around. And I think just with how the economy is doing, companies aren't making large investments into new offices, promotions, all those kind of things. Where over the last 2-3 years, we saw a lot of that. Especially software developers and then people in technology, they're moving into the city. They have huge incomes. They're very excited to go get the newest thing. And all the rental inventory was essentially brand new stuff, which also pushes up rental rates, right? You still have a lot of condos like in Burquitlam getting finished up here. So there's still more brand new stuff coming to the market. But what people don't necessarily see is that there could be a crane up there, but it might be a rental building, it might be a condo building. So I don't necessarily know how much of that is going to be rental by just looking at it. You got to look it up. Yeah, I would say the biggest thing is just let's go back to the one thing is going to be affordability. I think people have just said, landlords aren't going to drop their rents anymore, and they haven't because of expenses or whatever they think the market is. And people have just like, well, I can't, like, why would I ever pay that? There's just no value anymore.
Right. So part of that would be an influx of supply, right? More supply than in the past. We had serious issues with rent supply, as you mentioned, in, well, the entirety of Canada, realistically, but specifically in the major markets like Vancouver and Toronto, there really wasn't any rent supply for 21 and 22. There wasn't a lot going on, at least from my perspective. Is that true or no? Or was it just the type of supply?
Yeah, it's like a moment in time thing, right? So we saw this last October as well. So I believe last year we had like the rent sync and rentals.ca reports and stuff, and Zumper coming out saying like, oh, Burnaby's like 20% year over year on their rental rates and just crazy acceleration. Last summer was also the busiest tenant market I've ever seen. So like big blow off top prices that time. But all of that inventory that was new was because of all these brand new condo completions. So naturally, you're going to be asking your highest amount because it's brand new. Your mortgage rate is the highest it's been in 10, 15 years. And then that's what tenants see as they go out there, because the owners are like, oh, we're in a housing crisis. What do you mean? Like, we're going to get these rates. This is what the news is telling us that we're going to get. This is what my realtor is telling us we're going to get. This is what everyone's saying we're going to get. Let's get it. We rented a few units. People that closed first on those properties. So it was like August, and just popped them off like all-time records. And then people in the exact same building with the exact same unit on a pretty similar floor, they go from, instead of get like 2,500 for a one bedroom in like Burquitlam, or 27 for one in like Brentwood, you're looking at now like $2,200 because the market just stopped happening right on the same unit within literally weeks, like 6 to 8 weeks. And so what I'm getting at is there's these moments in time where there is a lot of availability, and right now there's more availability. And so if you're a tenant looking, you're going to feel like, oh, like we have people in the last like week and a half, we've had 4 tenants who have been fully approved on our side, fully approved by the owner. Everything looks great. And then they call us up, after the weekend, like, you know what, we found another spot. We really appreciate all your help. Thank you so much for being so kind and, responsive and all this kind of stuff. We just found a spot that's like closer for, my wife who's friends with this person. And they had like this story about how nice this place is for them now for their life, which is great. It shows choice. But it's like, this is really specific stuff. And this is like person after person after person after person dropping out because they are, going ahead and finding a better spot for themselves.
So that's really interesting. And Keaton, what that says to me is that people have basically choice more than anything else. They have choice, they have opportunities, they have the ability to go out and purchase or rent, in this case, something for a better value than what they were before, closer locations. They have more options, which basically all comes down to supply. And supply has been the one thing that, what realistically on the real estate market, the resale market side of things, that has been brought up as the number one issue in the country, really overall, for the better part of the last 2 years, 3 years, is we haven't had supply. And it's not something that's new per se. It's something that's been around for a long time. And that bleeds into supply as it relates to rentals, right? So that bleeds into it. So let's talk about some of the issues that are bringing this to light. And is this an issue? Because I would argue that although it's probably frustrating from one of your clients, like the landlord perspective, to be able to not rent out a property for what they're hoping for, what they saw 6 months ago, I mean, all in all, it's probably a good thing for consumers on the rental side of things, right?
Yeah, no, of course it is. And like going back to the like moment in time thing, is like there's supply now, and then there's supply in the whole, like they call it like the rental universe, right? So we did not build 100,000 homes overnight, or 100,000 households didn't leave overnight. So nothing has actually changed except for just a moment in time. So there's just stuff that's available. There's just more listings because of people's financial situation, what they're trying to do. A lot of the rental universe is going to be available are individual units. So like we have tons of clients who are calling us, hey, we're going to put on the market for rent, but our realtors also listed it for sale. So can we? I was like, we're not interested. And this is like over and over and over again. So would you it's not more inventory, it's just more ads, which then gives the tenants the perception of options. They have a phone number to call. If they can put together a good deal, then they get something good. Right. And that's more what's actually happening. What we actually need is enough supply in the greater Vancouver area that allows us to be between this like 3 and 5% vacancy rate, where the market can just act normally. And renewing your lease with your landlord is like a conversation you have where you're walking in the house with your groceries, not over some heated email where you're freaking out about being homeless.
Got it.
right? And that's what I would rather have. And the income statements for a 3 to 5% vacancy rental building looks great. Like it's just look at it's fine for everybody, right?
Okay, so where, like, let's talk about that for right now, because you talk about this 3 to 5% ratio. Where are we at right now?
We've been at 1.4, less than one. The average is 1.4 over the last decade per CMHC.
Okay,
Right.
and
And when the US is like 6 to 7 and always is.
okay, interesting. Well, I mean, city dependent, I'm sure, depending on
Yeah,
where you're
of
looking,
course.
and
Yeah.
obviously, San Diego versus, somewhere in Kansas,
Like
probably very
Idaho or
different.
something. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So, okay, so obviously we've seen this big move from the government. Okay, let's talk about this for a second. The
Mhm.
trends that we've seen here. Like, first and foremost, if y'all don't know, obviously for the last number of years, this isn't something new. CMHC has supported MLI Select, which is a financing tool or mechanism to allow people to construct apartments or multifamily units throughout the country. And that's obviously allowed people to get in and start building and constructing multifamily units for the purpose of renting them out. That's obviously been prevalent. And a lot of these buildings are starting to be complete now in more areas now. I don't know about
Mhm.
Vancouver. We also recently saw, and the question of whether or not this is going to have any impact in the marketplace is a good question. But we recently saw Freeland come out and talk about her new magical program to allow insured refinances to basically allow people to construct secondary suites in their homes and laneway homes to change the density in neighborhoods in places like Vancouver and outside of cities like that, right? We've also
Mhm.
just witnessed our government come out and, a little bit late, might I add, but for the sake of conversation, put massive limits on the amount of temporary residents that could come into our country. So the prospects right now for future rental rates and renters are looking pretty good at this point right now. Would you agree, or is this just kind of a flash in the pan? Are they doing enough? What are your thoughts on that? That's a lot of information.
Yeah, no, I would agree. Like I was at a conference a couple weeks ago and got to watch a couple of the development CEOs have a discussion, and they're building strictly rental right now. And they're talking about their performas like going forward. And they're saying like if we move our, rent growth performa from like 3 to 2, like that'll change us putting shovels in the ground or not. Right. It's like very, very finicky. And they're like, we're projecting 1% going forward. And normally it's 3, 4, 5. And they're just looking at, yeah, like it's gonna be slow. It's gonna be difficult. But what they know, they're bringing brand new product to the market, and they can afford a bit more
Yep.
than the average individual.
Yep.
And so they're part of that, tens of thousands of units of rental coming. But in my conversations with developers, it seems that while the MLS program is good and it's helped pencil these projects, it's more about the city pushing back on condo developments and giving more density for rental. It's way more at the municipal level, is my understanding.
Hmm.
And then they just look and they're like, okay, well, we already own the land. We want to build rental pencils with everything that they have, and condos don't. So let's do rental. And that's where this has finally started to go. But I don't think
Got it.
it's been like synchronized everywhere. It's just like, money flows like water in a capitalist system, right? So it's just kind of figured out this is where we're going to go with what we have, which is going to turn out to more choices for renters. And you're going to have a lot of people that move up from, their older 1 bedroom apartments to do like a brand new 2 bed when these buildings, release. And then that's going to open up more affordable stuff underneath. And it's going to create that, vacancy chain thing where people move on and move on and move on. And instead of it just affecting, if it's a 200 unit building, it's not just going to affect 200 households, it's going to affect, maybe 800 as they kind of step up and go along, which is good.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
So that addresses obviously the reality of having a little bit more supply and seeing rental rates slowly, maybe not disinflate or go down in value, but ultimately stay at a reasonable number and keep, I guess, the vacancy rates a little bit more reasonable, is what I'm hearing from you. Like, I guess what my thoughts are really quickly is like, what I've noticed is that we've got this massive push. And to your point, not every municipality is the same and not everyone thinks the same way about this, but we've got this massive push right now for apartment buildings and condo buildings to be built throughout the country in most major cities. And the question that I ask, and I always ask this question, is, are we, like, from a renter's perspective, does every renter want to live in just like a shoebox like condo throughout the entire country? And I think my answer to that's no. But like, what do you hear as it relates to that? And is that going to be really the only real option for most tenants going forward? Is basically a condo? Like, is that it? Do we have any other alternatives?
Yeah. I mean, we don't really have a lot of space for row home housing, like the land is kind of built out for the most part. The problem is that we've had rent control for 20 years, and they just blanketed across the entire province very irresponsibly. And they did it because, okay, well, rents are rising, we need to protect some people, so let's do that. So with rent control, they cover the entire province, where many of those areas weren't actually having issues with affordable housing. Rent control doesn't allow the government or anybody to even know who needs rent control and who doesn't, right? Which is another problem. And they did not create any policy to kind of counteract why they needed rent control in the first place. If they did that 20, 30 years ago when they put rent control in place, we would have a lot more like detached houses on the west side that were turned into, duplexes and row homes and townhome developments and all these kind of things, because they could have figured out, like, if you come to me with enough money or enough of a tax incentive or something, I don't care that I live in Kerrisdale around my kids or whatever. We're going to look at this to see if we can pass on some generational wealth and like make a move. But if you're just going to be the guy from Up, okay. But like the reason why that movie is good and funny is because it's like one super specific situation. One guy was just super grumpy and wouldn't move, right? That's not how people work. And I think we didn't put enough effort or energy into try to negotiate those areas. And what's really ridiculous, if we thought about it back then, there's way less money involved, right? Like houses back then were, not worth $4 or $5 million. They were worth $300,000 or $400,000. And getting row homes and things in those areas would have worked, but they turned on rent control, so they knew there was a problem, and they just didn't plan ahead. They just locked everything up, right? So if we're talking about what tenants are going to live in over the next, while, it's the city is very dense, and until we negotiate with, and from my understanding, essentially the baby boomers and the Gen X's in the west side and stuff, where all the detached houses are, there's not going to be any change. You're going to get high rises and low rises, and that's about it. Like we would love to live in a townhouse. We're very financially conservative, so we're just like, we don't see any value in the townhouses. Other, we're going to stay in our 2-bed condo. It's fine. But like, I don't know why anybody would, like, I understand why people feel pressure to like get into a townhouse or something, but it's just like the value is not there. It's such a waste of money. There's so few of them available.
Statement there.
Condos.
I mean, I guess I would argue a different side of things as it relates to, having a family and having the extra space and so forth. And then just generally speaking, like different options. But for the sake of conversation, like what you're talking about is just purely available housing for people and so forth. And almost like beggars not being choosers as it relates to, well, we don't have the land for it, let's build something.
But hang on, that extra bedroom is not just $1,000 a square foot. Right, that asset class jump is like $400,000, and so I get it, I understand, right? But it just like doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, so let's touch on that then in regards to what I mentioned before, which is that refinance program. So part of that is, back to your point, the people who do not want to leave their neighborhoods and do not want to sell their homes, and there's been lots and lots and lots of Twitter chatter and feedback about how many empty rooms there are in our country, and that seems to be like the new solution that our government is trying to solve here. I don't know that that's going to solve the problem as it relates to most people who already have a home, because they don't need to borrow 90% of their property value. But regardless, the point is, we're now suggesting, okay, let's get our homeowners in these neighborhoods to start refinancing to borrow the money to add laneway homes and basement suites. So now, we all know that laneway homes are great, in my opinion. I think they're fantastic. Great use of space. Keeps the neighborhood looking good for the most part, as long as it's built, constructed properly. They obviously allow people to like work and live in the neighborhoods, which you can't get with condos and apartment buildings necessarily. It's not the same neighborhood. So I think there's a lot of value there. I mean, basement suites have value, right? Like most people don't use their freaking basements. So, there's value in having that sort of thing. But what are your thoughts on whether or not, this program is going to be even used or utilized from your perspective? And have you heard anything from your property, I guess, landlords and the people that you talk to? Is anybody even chattering about this? Is anybody talking about this program?
So the only people I hear talking about it are like real estate professionals like us talking about it. I think the program is a joke. It's just a political thing for a bunch of reasons. So first, we're increasing the, borrowing amount so people can, cover their construction costs to build these units. Everywhere across the country, except for Toronto and Vancouver, you don't need more space on the CMHC loans and stuff, right? A lot of the homes that exist outside of Vancouver and Toronto are well under $1 million. So not 1.5, not 2, right? So that's the first thing. Secondly, BC and Ontario have the worst tenancy laws that push against landlords. Okay.
Yes.
The NDP on the last election here, they were talking about this like insurance policy for subsidized insurance for landlords who have secondary suites to help with the covering costs if a tenant's a bad tenant. And so this is the same thing where they're trying to give money to incentivize people to build more inventory on their existing property and their existing home. But we also have, it's very well known that there are thousands of units in Greater Vancouver that are just left empty because people don't want to rent them out. And they're worried about having to remove a bad tenant and they're not able to. And this is a bad tenant who is, throwing parties, doing drugs, causing issues in their house, or just being loud because this tenant lives in a home that was not constructed for multifamily, situations, which they should be able to do because a lot of these people are very reasonable. There's always the bad landlords and they get in the news and all that kind of crap. But many of these people are very reasonable. My whole point coming down to it is the money is not the problem. These people are sitting with completed units or almost completed units that they're not renting out because they'd rather not get the money than get potentially stuck with a bad tenant.
Okay,
But
so
we keep trying to throw money at it.
what you're saying is that the issue isn't necessarily supply as it relates to these types of properties, and that by bringing in a program like this, at least in the major cities or in BC and in Ontario, is what I'm hearing from you, that the primary issue is that people don't necessarily want to rent out their place because of the landlord rules or the tenancy rules, if you will. Being a landlord, you literally have zero rights. So you think that is the primary issue that needs to be solved for with this type of
Absolutely.
program? Like
Absolutely. But
the two of
yeah.
them together or just separately speaking?
No. We don't need, like I said, there's a whole bunch of units that are empty. Like we just need them to say, hey, we'll rent them out now because they're comfortable with the the rules with the at the tenancy and landlord branches. But like in Ontario, it takes you over a year to kick anybody out. In BC, it's a lot shorter, but the reasons why you kick somebody out are very limited. And it has nothing to do with like really compact, multifamily living. Apartment buildings are different. Houses are not really like there's noise and you're crossing over a lot of common areas and stuff together, and people just don't want to do it. It's not worth the money. So if they were to unlock that and make regulations that allowed owners that have a basement suite or a laneway home more landlord powers of the RTB, then probably. But then now we're getting into this very complicated, like even more complicated regulations. So I don't know how they're going to do that either, but that would be, in my opinion, the thing that unlocks all the properties that literally already exist. The money's already been spent. They're literally just opening the door, right? Like this is nothing.
Well, this gets into a whole conversation about whose rights are whose rights. I mean, we know that in Vancouver, we have a very, very vocal group of people, both online and offline, regarding how the government should supply more rentals and units. And it's basically, I don't know, landlords are terrible, bad people, and blah, 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 all this kind of fun stuff. And you're arguing, obviously, that landlords, I don't know, but you're reasoning that landlords require actually more rights to have the desire or willingness. And I as a person who owns multiple properties that are rentals, I would agree 1,000,000,000%. Thankfully, I've been nothing but fortunate with awesome tenants. And aside from one incident in my career of owning properties, and it's never been anything that's caused any serious issues. But if it did, I would obviously probably not be in a great spot and be thinking differently right now. So I guess the question mark is this something that's realistic to say, or is this just kind of like, hey, this is the reality of it? Nobody realistically, or what is it going to take to make that kind of change?
Yeah, well, like it's not the landlords or tenants' fault that housing policy's been shit for 25, 30 years.
That's fair.
Like we're just still here. Like we've been distracted with the mountains and the water and the good restaurants and the multicultural communities and the hikes and all that kind of stuff. Shitty hockey team, good and bad, no Stanley Cup. But like we just have not had housing policy where we want to have this as like a great place to live for literally the international community. Like we have people moving here globally all the time. Like, do we want this to be a global city or not? And it half is and it half isn't, which is just crap. Like we're not, like, what are you doing? And if it's all just about politics, it's okay, well, good luck. But it's pinned landlords and tenants against each other. And they're both like many landlords and tenants are both in situations that if a person who wasn't in that situation, they're reasonable, and then you put them in that situation, they now become unreasonable, right? Like if I dropped you off the side of a building, you go from reasonable to unreasonable pretty quick. And that people just get put in these extreme situations. Many landlords by their own fault and planning, but tenants is just like there's not enough housing and rental is too high, and average incomes aren't very good here either. They're higher in Alberta, for God's sakes.
Mm, mm. Okay, well, I mean, you made your point basically. Long story short, that adding the opportunity to finance for laneway homes based on your experience is not something that we're likely to see. What about another big factor that we're seeing, and how this impacts the housing market from a rental perspective now and in the future, which is these new immigration rules and quotas that have been recently published that, well, in short, they're going to reduce the amount of people coming into our country by basically half and focus more on permanent residents versus temporary residents. At least that's what was publicized. Do you think that has any realistic impact on your, I guess, in the market from your experience?
Yeah, from my perspective, it's going to affect the rental rates of detached homes. And they've already seen this pretty aggressively in Ontario. So a house that would normally rent for like $4,000 a month to, 5 students, $800 a door, or $800 a bedroom. Those houses are going to rent for $2,500 a month instead, which then allows people to upgrade into those homes and then allows other people to upgrade into those homes that, are now vacated. That's the main thing that I see. Like I'm just pulling up my view for like our dashboard here for like ID breakdowns over our applications. We have like Canadian driver's license and like people who are not here on a work visa
Mhm.
as 85% of our applications.
Wow. Okay.
So it's like I don't really see it as a big factor. It has lined up with rental rates starting to drop and the rental market being slow.
Yeah.
It just wasn't like my understanding is that it's mostly students that we're slowing down on, and then they're the ones that go to the rooming houses and the dorms, and so the rooming houses won't be as popular anymore, and that will push down kind of the upper level of rents for sure.
So there will be a cascade effect, is what we're hearing here.
Yeah,
Yeah, across the
it's what
board.
I
I mean,
expect. Yeah.
I mean, they're reducing permanent residents for 2025 from 500 to 395, reducing permanent residents from 500 to 380 in 2026, and setting a target in 2027 of 365. So there's obviously a couple 100,000 less people. And again, not knowing the plan inside and out, my understanding is that there's a massive impact on the amount of temporary residents that are going to be allowed in the country going forward. But to your point, that's been one of the biggest things that has been at least like a hot topic over the course of the last 2 years. Is like we've got over 1 million new people to our country, students, non-students, whatever, all this kind of what does this actually mean as it relates to rental rates? So we've got now opening up some supply if people decide to use it, which obviously, as you mentioned, is probably going to be more impacted in lower price areas or areas like maybe in provinces like Alberta, the refi to add laneway homes. I could see that being the case. We've also got obviously more properties going from condos to apartment buildings that are being constructed and probably ready in 26 and 27. So there's more supply there. We also have less new applicants. I'm throwing my microphone all over the place. So we've got all these factors together, and it seems like almost like a perfect storm for future renters, like looking forward. And therein lies my next kind of follow-up question. Is our government trying to now flip us into a nation of renters now, or what's going on there?
I don't know. Like that's one of my major curiosities of like I just even if I was to be able to be told what they're trying to do, and then you hit me with the Men in Black, memory flash, just so I have to forget, so I can't tell anybody. I would okay, sure, the bubble. I would not like. I just do not understand what they're trying to do. I think the whole thing. I think it's really really simple. It's just like stay in power is really all it is, and this was why they have this like what's going to sound really cool to the average person, and what is it? We're not going to have to spend money on it though, because it's not really going to create any new transactions or risk or anything. It's all just political crap, which is unfortunate because we're all here trying to like live our lives. And that's like I'm in this all the time, in the shit, looking at things, trying to figure out the rationale behind it, and it just doesn't make sense. But from stuff that reading on social media and just people's comments and everything, like hopefully things are starting to shift where like the feedback to politicians to get back to like, hey, no, this is a real problem. This is like a breaking point. I need to do something. And maybe they might start to do that. Like millennials are the ones that like run the world now, or pretty close. They're like 5 years away. Where it's like we're the ones making all the decisions now. We grew up in this crap, and so that's where it might start to change. But I mean, this is a good start in my opinion. It's just they need to keep building, and if they don't, we're just going to come right back to this because Vancouver's a great place to live regardless of the housing situation. But like with the immigration thing, it's like, I always compare it to a house party. So you maybe invite a whole bunch of people over, you fill the fridge with beer, and it's like, okay, a few people invited some more of their friends, where it's already pretty crazy. And then, the government decides to invite over the football team. It's like, why did we do this? Like, what are you thinking? And all I can think of is like GDP and, trying to, I don't know. I have no idea. I really wish I knew the answer. If anybody knows the answer, you let me know, please. I will take you out for a nice dinner and you'll tell me.
Yeah, no, fair points. Either way, I think at the end of the day, interesting changes across the board. And I hate to say it, but obviously this is well, I don't actually. That's not true. I don't hate to say it. But let me take a step back here. I just genuinely believe that this is all the stuff that's going on right now is just genuinely good news for anybody who is actually trying to rent out a property or was going through the struggles a few years ago and is happy to see that the changes are a little different. So, last question I have for you here as it relates to rental rates is like looking forward. If I'm someone who's looking to rent out a property or buy a property for an investment, since you're mostly related in the Greater Vancouver area, what are the areas that you still see could be beneficial for a potential landlord? Are there areas of opportunity, areas that they should be looking, and areas that they should avoid right now?
The big stuff, like, and this as well in the mortgage world, it's very, very personal. So you can go and buy, a condo for like an 8 cap or something out in Prince George somewhere, right? And it's okay, it'll get good rents compared to the purchase price. But if the Prince George economy changes, you could have, 10-15% vacancy for who knows how long. But that's a low entry point to buy something. We're like, if you're looking in Greater Vancouver, we are still, while we do have this, bit of glut of supply situation we just talked about, we are still in a scenario where we have incredibly low vacancy. So it's not about will your property rent, it's about what it will rent for. I always tell clients, they'll ask me a question, is my property going to rent? What's going on in the market? Like, I'm really worried about this. Okay, great. Well, if I put it on for $1,000 a month, it's gone tomorrow. Like, well, of course it will. Okay, great, good. So this is about your expenses and your expectations. So do not put yourself in a situation where your expectations are way too high. Do not go buy a brand new condo. Do not go buy something that's downtown Vancouver because it sounds good. Go buy something in your budget, plan that it's, plan for, 1 month's worth of vacancy for turnovers every year. That is 8%. It's very safe, right? Go actually walk some properties that are maybe a bit, distressed. They need a little bit of lipstick. They need some renovations and stuff. Talk to your professionals who are going to walk you through the very basic common sense stuff. Not common sense, but like once you hear it, you're like, oh, of course. Great. Like, get all that information together where you feel like an expert. And the good thing about trying to buy a rental property is you got to save a bunch of money. So if you want to do it, save the money and have the conversations while you're doing it to keep it, exciting. Because just put money aside every month is really boring. But you got to get there. But I mean, we're in an area that has been internationally recognized for a long time as the most unaffordable place to live on the planet. I do not see, save for the big earthquake, that changing. So go buy something that is within your budget that you understand and you're excited about. And it should be, it should be relatively boring. My favorite kind of property is a 2-bed, 1-bath, 8 to 12 years old, close to the SkyTrain line or incoming SkyTrain stuff. They always transact at a less dollar per square foot than a 2-bed, 2-bath in the exact same building on the exact same floor. So you buy it cheap, which is great. You have less renovation costs. Like, there's less bathrooms and fixtures and tile, all that kind of stuff to deal with because you got one bathroom. If there was one property type that will always rent no matter what's happening in the economy, it's a 2-bed, 1-bath. You got roommates, you got small families, it's affordable. That's the best thing to go. If you can grab that in, Port Coquitlam or something, awesome. Just make sure it fits in your budget. it will rent. Just make sure you're not going after the rents or like the rentals.ca report number. Like just have some space there to make it work and just get your hands dirty and don't over leverage yourself to where you're stressing out.
Be conservative. I got you. That probably
Yeah.
is the best approach there. And then hope that at some point in the future, our government decides to change the Tenancy Act. No, do not wait for that. That's never going to happen. But we can all wish, we can all hope at this point right now. Keaton, thanks so much for jumping on the show. Listen, I know a lot of people follow you on Instagram and Twitter. We'll tag your handle in the notes for YouTube and for the podcast in the show notes. So if y'all enjoyed what Keaton had to say here today, or you're more interested in learning more about his company and his opinions, because those are very well published online, then make sure to go ahead and click and follow him. Thank you, Keaton, for hopping on the show today. Appreciate you, and look forward to the next one.
Absolutely. Thank you.
That was an unreal episode of The Flow. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did on my side right here. If you haven't already done so, make sure to check out all of the incredible resources that we have available. You can find us on Instagram at Flow Mortgage Co. You can find us on our website, getflowmortgage.ca. And of course, don't forget our free first-time homebuyer masterclass that's currently available on our website for anyone who listens to the episodes. And if you loved what you listened here today, the only thing that we ask for is to share this with someone else that you think this could help. And hey, maybe leave us a great review online.